Poštovani gledaoci, dobrodošli u N1 na 1. Tema revizije presude Međunarodnog suda pravde u slučaju Bosna i Hercegovina protiv Srbije i Crne Gore za genocid ponovo je aktualizirana nakon izjava predsjednika SDA Bakira Izetbegovića. Da li je revizija mogla biti drugačije odrađena? Da li agent imao akreditaciju i može li se sada uraditi bilo šta po ovom pitanju? Samo su neka od pitanja koja ćemo postaviti prvom agentu Bosne i Hercegovine pred Međunarodnim sudom pravde, profesoru Francisu Boylu, koji nam se pridružuje iz Čikaga. Professor Boyle, welcome to N1 program.
Well, thank you very much for having me on, and my best personal regards to all my friends in Bosnia.
Professor, Chairman of SDA and House of Peoples Bakir Izetbegovic has said in an interview last night, I quote, "With that audit, you know, I was told, and it was a serious group of lawyers, my advisors, lawyers, and so on, who told me we had no legitimacy, but that we shouldn't pay attention to that. Let's go ahead. Don't mention at all in a public that we have no legitimacy for this thing, that we don't have an agent. I was listening to them. I shouldn't have listened to them here, and I should have opened the matter to the public and to other Bosniak leaders such as Radončić, Nikšić, and others. That was a mistake. I should have shared the responsibility." End of quote. What is your reaction to this?
Well, Bakir could have called me up, and of course, he never did. This is no mistake by anyone involved here. This was outright sabotage against the World Court lawsuit that, you know, I filed for the late President Bakir Izetbegovic in 1993, and won two overwhelming orders for the Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina, my client, against Yugoslavia to cease and desist from committing all acts of genocide against both the people and the Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina. This was the first time ever that any lawyer had won two such orders in one case since the World Court was founded in 1921. And then in order to break the arms embargo and stop the tripartite carve-up of Bosnia, pursuant to the so-called contact group program, I convinced President Izetbegovic to give me the authority to sue Britain at the International Court of Justice for aiding and abetting genocide against the Bosnians. And those papers were all ready to be filed with the World Court. I'd advised the presidency and the Bosnian Foreign Minister, Mohammed Shakirbi, when Britain threatened Bosnia with dire consequences, including starving them in the winter of 1993, and demanded that that lawsuit be withdrawn. I should also point out the Europeans threatened the Bosnians. Even the Americans threatened the Bosnians if they went forward with the lawsuit against Britain. So that lawsuit was not pursued. However, I did file a declaration with the World Court that we withdrew the lawsuit against Britain under duress and threats and intimidation. And therefore, I reserve the right of Bosnia and Herzegovina to sue Britain at any time in the future. And that is still the case today, that those proceedings against Britain can be reinstituted. And as a matter of fact, I have a new book coming out that should be published soon there in Sarajevo, entitled Stopping Serb Genocide against the Bosnians, that has the entire lawsuit against Britain right there. All the legal papers, the oral argument, and everything in the hope and expectation that perhaps a new Bosnian government might file it. In any event, they all knew that the great powers knew I was behind Bosnia's legal strategy, and they demanded I be fired. So, of course, I was fired. But I wasn't getting paid for any of this. I was doing it pro bono publico. I was even eating my own expenses, so okay. But I did make numerous trips over there to Bosnia. There were efforts by the Americans and the Europeans to kill off this lawsuit. And I made trips over there to make sure it would not be killed off. But what happened then, it was sabotage. And the proof was that I filed a lawsuit in 1993 and won these two orders overwhelmingly in favor of Bosnia against Yugoslavia to cease, desist all acts of genocide against the Bosnians. And yet there was not even a trial until 2006. Okay, so that's 1993 to 2006. Basically, in 1993, I had won that lawsuit, but there was no trial until 2006. So that's, many years later, 13 years later. And during that time, the lawsuit was basically sabotaged internally. And
but
so,
Professor, let me interject here, if I may. If you knew and if anybody else knew that this lawsuit was sabotaged, and the President Izetbegovic now is telling to Bosnian people that he knew and his advisors knew that the agent didn't have accreditation to have a legitimacy in front of ICJ. Are you surprised that this ended this way? And if you were our agent at that time, would you do something different, and could this end up in favor of Bosnia and Herzegovina at the end?
well, yes, I mean, Bakir is continuing the cover-up on the sabotage against the lawsuit. When the judgment came down in 2017, I stand corrected. The hearing was in 2000. I'm sorry, in 2006. When the judgment came down in 2007, it was clear it had also been sabotaged at the World Court by the judges there, including Higgins, the president. She was the British judge, and the British tried to sabotage us all along. At that point, certainly what I would have done is immediately prepare the revision of the lawsuit starting the very next day and making it clear to the World Court that I was preparing the revision of the lawsuit and I was going to file a revision of that lawsuit. Instead, what happened was that Softic did nothing, and for the next 10 years did nothing at all until I began to give interviews over there in Bosnia saying the revision is coming up and they better do something. So at the very last minute, Softic and Bakir did the least amount that could have been done. But of course, by then it was too late. If you sit on your legal rights for another 10 years, it is to be expected that the World Court would find a way out from dealing with the lawsuit, and they did. So what can I say? But, Bakir, Softic, their advisors, they were all in on the sabotage. And again, another proof of this is not only the timing, but Montenegro. Softic let Montenegro out of the lawsuit. When I sued for Bosnia and Herzegovina, I sued Serbia and Montenegro together. Okay, they were a joint state at that time. And yet, when it came to the trial and the judgment, they let Montenegro completely off the hook, despite the fact we know Montenegro was up to its eyeballs in genocide against the Bosnians. And the reason they let Montenegro off the hook was because the Americans and the Europeans wanted to integrate Montenegro into NATO, which they now have done. So,
Professor, let me ask you this then, in line with that, what you're saying at the moment. You're saying that basically, based on your word, that the President Izetbegovic and Mr. Softic are sole to blame for this. But we had before Mr. Izetbegovic in the presidency also Mr. Silajdžić and Mr. Tihić and Mr. Komšić, who were also members of the presidency, and they didn't do anything in those 10 years from 2007 to 2017. Was it possible to do something to win this in those years? And especially, was it possible to do this against a well-experienced legal expert such as Tibor Varadi, who was agent for Serbia at that time?
Well, he had no experience that I'm aware of. I was the one who won the 2 orders for Bosnia overwhelmingly in favor of Bosnia. And indeed, at that time, Yugoslavia had hired Shabtai Rosen of Israel, who was supposed to be the world's leading expert on the law and procedure of the International Court of Justice. And I demolished him twice in a row. Indeed, the second time he brought in 3 Serb lawyers with him, whom I called Mo, Larry, and Curly, the 3 Stooges, and I demolished all 4 of them. So, Varadi was no expert. Rosen was the expert. I got rid of him, and indeed, it was so devastating that Yugoslavia got rid of Rosen and brought in some new lawyers. So, that isn't the case. But, yes, you're right. No one did anything from 2007 to 2017, and we're just hoping the matter would go away. And it would have gone away, and still I began to raise holy hell over there and say, well, what's going on with the revision of the lawsuit? So there we are. What can I say? But I have to point out, it goes back to the sabotage of this lawsuit that I had basically won as far back as 1993. And the reason is that enormous pressure was applied to all Bosnian government officials by the Americans and the Europeans to drop this lawsuit because, like they did to Montenegro, they wanted to integrate Serbia into NATO and the European Union. But they knew this could not be done if Serbia was found guilty of genocide at the World Court. So there we are today.
Professor, let me ask you this. At that point, when you're mentioning Serbia and a conviction for genocide, we know that Serbia was not convicted for a genocide in this case, and that was taken responsible in other elements of this case when it comes to prevention of genocide. But today we have, for example, 2 very recent cases which are significant here in Bosnia and Herzegovina. General Đukić and Mr. Lukic are free and living in Serbia without any responsibility in a court or in justice when it comes to Bosnia and Herzegovina. What is your opinion on that? Do we still see a situation in which Serbia is basically shielding some of those who are responsible for what has happened in Bosnia and Herzegovina during the war years?
Well, it's not just Serbia, but the great powers are shielding Serbia because they still want to integrate Serbia into NATO and the European Union. For example, the decisions on Mladic and Karadzic, if you read them, they do not at all get into any responsibility of Serbia for the genocide by Mladic and Karadzic. Likewise, the decision on Šešelj, he was completely left off free by the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. And that is because Šešelj directly implicated Serbia in all the genocide. So if you look at the pattern of cases here, it's all to cut off any responsibility by Serbia for the genocide in Bosnia, which I proved overwhelmingly as far back as 1993, and to make it clear that Serbia could still be integrated into NATO and the European Union. That's the agenda here.
Professor, what is your opinion on a current situation which we have here in the Western Balkans, and that is enormous number of cases in which we have denials of genocide, some of those including Prime Minister Brnabić of Serbia, some ministers from Serbia, and also politicians, and now even Nobel laureate Peter Handke. What is your view on this?
Yes, well, you know, after the genocide comes the genocide denial. And that is the stage we are dealing with here with respect to Bosnia, including giving the so-called Nobel Prize for Literature to the Srebrenica genocide denier here. As you know, I had been the attorney of record for the mothers of Srebrenica and Podrina before the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, and convinced Carla Del Ponte to indict Milosevic himself for almost every crime in the ICTY statute, including 2 counts of genocide. One for genocide against Bosnia in general, and the second for the genocide at Srebrenica. And as you know, he was on trial at The Hague. The prosecution had closed its case, Del Ponte, and I was, standing by to work with her and advise her on this. And Milosevic then filed a motion to dismiss the charges against him, and that motion was denied, including the 2 counts of genocide for Bosnia in general and Srebrenica in particular. Milosevic was then going to open up his defense that would have implicated all of the internationals in his genocidal conduct against Bosnia, including Clinton, Major, Owen, Hurd, all the UN officials, Wesley Clark, etc. And he was going to implicate all of them because they were all dealing with him behind the scenes or even in the public record. All this is in my new book, Stopping Serb Genocide Against the Bosnians, whereupon, out of nowhere, Milosevic died there in a cell in The Hague. He just died.
Professor, let me ask you this, in line of what you're saying, and you're mentioning USA and Europe, and they are pretty undecisive when it comes to Bosnia and the region. President of SDA Izetbegovic just recently have said that if Republika Srpska doesn't want to go to NATO, then Bosnia would not go to NATO until RS agrees to that. And there are also talks about possible exchanges of territories between Serbia and Kosovo, often including mentions of dissolution of Bosnia. Could we, after all, end up in NATO and the European Union, or that is just a dream for which we will be awakened with the bad news?
I think you're correct that the plan by the Americans and the Europeans still is to carve up Bosnia and Herzegovina, going all the way back to the Karađorđevo agreement between Milosevic and Tudjman. That was very clear to me at the Owen-Stoltenberg negotiations, where they were going to carve up Bosnia in 3 pieces, give Herceg-Bosna to Tudjman in Croatia, Republika Srpska they would give to Milosevic, and there would be a rump little Muslim Bantustan left there around Sarajevo. I stopped that. It never happened. That plan, as we know, would have resulted in the ethnic cleansing of 1.5 to 2 million more Bosnians, and we already had 2 million ethnically cleansed. It would have destroyed our statehood under international law. It would have robbed us of our United Nations membership. And indeed, I got the World Court to rule against that 13-2 in the second order I won, that this would be the result of genocide. But
Professor,
that is the plan. That's still the plan today with these territorial exchanges. The Americans have made this clear under Trump and Bolton that basically they want Serbia to give up what they have in Kosovo. In return, Serbia will get Republika Srpska. Indeed, they are now resurrecting the Hayes-April plan towards that objective in Parliament. And we defeated the Hayes-April plan the last time. Indeed, even the Bosnian Foreign Minister, Mohammed Shakirbi, agreed with me that the Hayes-April plan would be fatal to Bosnia and Herzegovina. So,
Professor, can I ask you this, and I'm asking you for a short answer because I have a very short time on my disposal left. The first question is, do you think that the naming of the new special representative for the Western Balkans in face of Matthew Palmer is part of that role? And do you believe that there is still a chance that will be some new special representative for Bosnia and Herzegovina by the U.S.? And also, my second question is, do you believe that Bosnia and Herzegovina is somehow left to be a place where the big powers such as France, Russia, China, United States, United Kingdom and Turkey will play their games, and that we will be here always as their playground? But please answer me those two in short if you can.
Yes, I think the American agenda and the European agenda is still to carve Bosnia up between Croatia and Serbia. And the steps that we're seeing are toward that end, including resurrecting the Hayes-April plan in the Bosnian parliament. That is extremely dangerous. Even Mohammed Shakirbi agreed with me on that. So I think that's still the agenda. That's been the agenda since I got involved here in December 1992 under the Vance-Owen plan. And I advised President Izetbegovic on Vance-Owen. So that's still their objective. And you're right, they will still, the great powers are still playing games in Bosnia. But the Bosnians have to resist and say, no, we're not going along with this. We're the victims of genocide. We demand justice. We're going to reject the Hayes-April plan being resurrected now there in Parliament. And you will, at the end of the day, have to deal with us in accordance with international law and justice and our demands.
Perfect. Professor Boyle, thank you so very much for being with us from Chicago today.
Well, thank you very much. And again, my best personal regards to all my friends. And this whole story is told in my new book that should be out soon, Stopping Serb Genocide Against the Bosnians. It will be in English. And then I hope at some point it can be in Bosnian, so everyone can read exactly what happened here, at least going back to 1992 when I got involved.
Poštovani gledaoci, bio je ovo ekskluzivni intervju sa profesorom Francisom Boylom, nekadašnjim i prvim agentom Bosne i Hercegovine pred Međunarodnim sudom pravde u slučaju Bosna i Hercegovina protiv Srbije i Crne Gore za genocid. Hvala vam što ste bili uz nas. Ostanite i dalje uz program N1. Srdačan pozdrav.